The 5th of August, 1993. A 7-member mountaineering team set out for the Hamar-Daban Mountains in southern Siberia for a hiking expedition. However, in the end, only one person survived. The exact fate of the others remains a mystery to this day. This incident, together with the Dyatlov Pass event, is known as one of the two most baffling mysteries in the mountaineering community. August 1993, Siberia. With the arrival of summer, the snow on the peaks began to melt, but the river water remained icy cold. A kayak was cutting through the rugged mountain waters. This place was rarely visited by people, and the scenery seemed serene. The kayak's owner was a tourist from Ukraine, Alexander. He was leisurely enjoying everything around him, savoring a moment of peace away from the bustling city. Suddenly, from the woods on the opposite bank came some unusual noises. Yet at that moment, he had no idea what was about to happen next. Would involve one of the most bizarre, unsolved cases in human history. As he paddled closer in his kayak, he saw clearly a girl about 17 or 18 years old, wildly waving her hands at him. Her face was covered in dirt, and her clothes seemed stained with blood. Her eyes betrayed a deep terror, as if she had just experienced something truly horrifying. Without hesitation, Alexander jumped into the icy river, swimming to the other side. The girl appeared somewhat delirious, muttering constantly, but her words made no sense, completely illogical. After a long while, Alexander roughly understood what she meant. She came from a school mountaineering team, which had arrived here to hike a few days earlier, but all the other members had died, and she was the only survivor. The story began a week earlier. The 2nd of August, 1993, two hiking teams from Kazakhstan were trekking along a steep mountain path, heading deep into the Hamar-Daban Mountains for a 3-day hiking expedition. Both teams came from the same school, mostly teenagers, with some in their early 20s. One team was led by Konstantin Kazantsev. Kazantsev was responsible for leading that team. Another leader was 1-year-old Lyudmila, who served as the lead guide. Lyudmila has extensive hiking experience. She has gone hiking many times. She has crossed the Hamada foothills. And also Lyudmila, her 6-year-old daughter Natalia, is also in Konstantin's team. You might wonder why the mother and daughter are not on the same team. This is actually because they are taking different routes. Lyudmila's team will take a high-altitude route along the ridge, while Konstantin's team moves along the valley. Although the valley route is lower in altitude, in terms of technical difficulty, it is actually harder than the ridge route. In Russia, routes are classified into 6 levels based on difficulty, with level 1 being the easiest and level 6 the hardest. According to this classification, the ridge route is a moderate, level 3, with slopes of about 35 to 45 degrees, not requiring professional climbing equipment, but it demands a certain level of stamina and experience. The valley route is classified as level 4 difficulty, with some sections exceeding 55 degrees of steep rock, requiring climbers to have some rock climbing experience and the use of professional climbing equipment. Their plan is to start from Merino Village, follow along the Blue Valley River, and at a fork midway, the two teams will split, taking the ridge and valley routes respectively, and finally regroup at Lake Tavatui. After meeting at the lake, they return together. Although it was August at the time, the weather in the Siberian mountains is unpredictable, and the first snowfall usually comes by the end of August. Therefore, before setting off, Lyudmila specifically contacted the meteorological station to inquire about the weather during the hike. The reply was that they might encounter some wind and rain, but overall the weather would be good and would not greatly affect the hike. But just a few days before their departure, they received an unsettling warning. According to a local, the wild animals in the mountains have recently, for unknown reasons, become especially aggressive. Some even witnessed the terrifying scene of a large male animal attacking a moving train in the area. Although he couldn't explain why this was happening, he warned travelers to be extra cautious. The hike started off very smoothly, and soon both teams reached the fork. Lyudmila led her 6 team members. The ridge route climb has begun. Among these 6, some are beginners who have just started high-altitude hiking. Therefore, Lyudmila knew she had to allocate their energy wisely. The hike was going very smoothly, and they even crossed the first mountain ahead of schedule. Even Tatiana, who was hiking a level 3 route for the first time, along with Anna and Victoria, kept up steadily with the pace of the group. At this speed, they should be able to reach the meeting point early. However, at this moment, the weather quietly began to change. This mountain range was about to reveal its cold and ruthless side. On the 4th of August, the second day of hiking, as the altitude rose, the trees and vegetation gradually thinned out. Lyudmila's team reached a treeless alpine zone, a high mountain area without any trees. This meant they lost all cover and shelter. They were completely exposed to the high altitude environment. At that moment, the weather started to change. It turned harsh, with strong winds and heavy rain attacking the entire climbing team without warning. Visibility and temperature began to drop sharply, and the team's pace noticeably slowed down. Lyudmila tightly held the map, knowing that the most important thing now was not to stray from the correct route. Once lost in the mountains, the consequences would be unimaginable. But the low visibility around them clearly posed a significant challenge for her. Confirming the map also took a lot of time. Lyudmila knew they wouldn't be able to cross the mountain pass before the bad weather arrived. So she immediately ordered to set up camp where they were. The students quickly finished pitching their tents. Lyudmila told the students to finish preparations before nightfall. They went out to gather some mushrooms to supplement their dinner. The students indeed picked quite a few, a local type of mushroom, rich in minerals and nutrients, which was a good supplementary food for climbers. As night fell, the whole team crowded into 2 tents for the night. One tent was for the boys, and the other was for the girls. Lyudmila, Tatiana, Victoria, and Valentina were all in one tent, huddled together for warmth. She tried not to show her worries, because he knew at this moment he was the students' only support. However, the wind outside the tent kept howling relentlessly. As the temperature dropped sharply, the rain gradually turned into heavy snow. On Lyudmila's map, there was actually a marked peak not far from them called Titlin Peak, where a wooden cabin stood, which could have provided them with good shelter. But Lyudmila wasn't sure how far away they still were from there, and he didn't want to risk sending the students out in such weather conditions to a shelter that might only exist on the map. Meanwhile, not far away, Konstantin's team was experiencing a completely different situation. Because they were at a lower altitude, there was neither wind nor snow, and the team was moving very smoothly. By the 5th of August, they arrived on time at Lake Tavatu, the rendezvous point agreed upon by both teams. According to the original plan, they would gather here and return together, ending this trip. When Konstantin's team arrived, they found Lyudmila's team hadn't arrived yet. Keep in mind, Konstantin's route was more difficult than Lyudmila's route. If everything went smoothly, logically, Lyudmila's team should have arrived at the rendezvous point first. But at this time, no one was overly worried. After all, there were several hiking novices in Lyudmila's team, so it's understandable that their pace was slower than expected. Lyudmila's daughter, Natalia, was also with Konstantin's team at this time. He believed that with his mother's experience, even if unexpected situations arose, she was fully capable of leading the team out safely. So he rested by the lake together with the others, waiting for the other team. However, as time passed, Lyudmila's team still did not appear. People gradually began to realize something was wrong. Worry slowly spread through everyone's hearts. But due to limitations in communication equipment at the time, they couldn't get timely information from the other team. Regarding the other team's situation, they guessed that maybe Lyudmila's team had encountered bad weather and therefore had turned back. It was also possible that they had arrived at the meeting point first, but for some reason did not wait for the others, choosing instead to move forward. This sense of unease put enormous pressure on everyone, especially Natalia. On the second night waiting for her mother, she dreamed that her mother said to her that she was trapped in the mountains. She couldn't get out. When he woke up from the dream, worried about his mother, He couldn't sleep all night. Early the next morning, he applied to Konstantin to return the way they came to meet Lyudmila's team. After all, they were only on the Season 3 route and didn't need special equipment. Konstantin expressed understanding of Natalia's concerns. He understood her worries. But since their supplies were only enough to complete the full route, if they turned back now to search for someone, it might put the entire team in danger. So, following Konstantin's advice, they left Lake Tavatui, heading directly to the trip's endpoint, a small town on the shore of Lake Baikal. They had hoped to possibly encounter Lyudmila's team here, or at least hear some news about them. But reality disappointed them once again. There was no trace of Lyudmila's team, nor any sign indicating they had descended the mountain. Only then did everyone have to accept that Lyudmila's team must have encountered some danger in the mountains. Looking at the Hamar-Daban mid-mountain range shrouded in clouds and mist, the Hamar-Daban range, Konstantin began to doubt in his heart whether he had made a wrong decision. This was a decision he would regret for life. Let's rewind the time to the night of the 4th of August. In the fierce wind at the mountain peak, Lyudmila and her students couldn't sleep because of the cold. In the early morning hours, a young man entered the tent where Lyudmila was. His name was Sasha, 23 years old. At the time, he was dating Natalia, who was Lyudmila's future daughter-in-law, so their relationship was very close, seeming like mother and son to outsiders. He told Lyudmila that the boy's condition was not optimistic. Many were showing signs of illness. At this altitude, with no trees to block the wind around, they were completely exposed to the biting cold wind and heavy snow. To make matters worse, the tent's ropes couldn't withstand the fierce wind and were snapped. The wind and snow blew directly into the tent, and the sleeping bags were soaked with melted snow, making it a harsh night for everyone. Finally, dawn arrived, and Lyudmila told everyone that they had to set off immediately. After eating some simple canned breakfast, they decided to evacuate southward, moving to a lower altitude. Although this direction roughly followed their original planned route, following the original planned route, they avoided the higher peaks and moved to lower ground where the trees could shelter them, helping them resist some of the harsh weather. But the weather showed no signs of improving. The strong winds continued to howl, and everyone moved slowly, step by step, through the snow. Around 11 a.m., Sasha suddenly fell while walking through the snow, and his companions helped him up, but he soon fell again. Lyudmila told the other students to keep moving forward while he stayed behind to take care of Sasha, assuring the others they would catch up soon. So the other 5 students helped each other, moving slowly and cautiously downhill. But not far after they left, they heard Lyudmila crying out in a heart-wrenching scream behind them. 17-year-old Valentine heard it, turned away from the group, and went back to see what had happened. For convenience, we'll call him Little Val from now on. When Little Val returned to Lyudmila and Sasha, he found Lyudmila slumped on the ground and Sasha lying motionless to the side. Little Val approached and checked Sasha carefully, noticing his eyes were vacant and lifeless, clearly indicating he had passed away. Little Val was shocked and at a loss, and for a moment, he felt as if he had fallen into a nightmare. But if this was a nightmare, Sasha's death was only the beginning, because shortly after, Lyudmila also collapsed. At that moment, the other students returned. Saying Lyudmila fell, they were thrown into utter panic, because Lyudmila was their only hope and pillar. If he went down, they didn't know how they could get out of this snow-covered mountain. At that moment, Little Val was horrified to realize everyone was screaming and struggling. Everyone was screaming and struggling, not out of panic, but more like they were experiencing real, tangible pain. He noticed that some companions' eyes, noses, and ears starting to bleed, some foaming at the mouth, and some frantically tearing at their clothes. Xiaohua had never seen anything like this before. In fact, his companions were collapsing one by one. Xiaohua tried to help his friend Victoria up, but Victoria, like a madwoman, bit his hand. She bit his hand. Even so, Xiaohua didn't give up. He still desperately tried to drag his companions to a lower altitude, but after only a few steps, he saw a scene that shocked him even more. Another girl, Tatiana, came to a rock and repeatedly slammed her head against it until her face was covered in blood, then collapsed, motionless in the snow. Xiaohua froze from extreme fear and panic, standing rooted to the spot as if time had stopped. After an unknown amount of time, he felt a hand pushing him, pulling him back from his shock. He looked down, and the one pushing him was Dennis, a boy from the team. His ears and mouth were bleeding, but he still mustered all his strength to say his last words to him. "Get out of here, run." Xiaohua finally snapped back to reality and took off running down the mountain. Along the way, he glanced back once, seeing Dennis lying on the snow, struggling to crawl downhill. But shortly after, he lay still in the snow, motionless. Within just those few minutes, the entire climbing team had died, leaving only Xiaohua alive. Driven by a powerful will to survive, Xiaohua overcame his intense fear, stumbling his way into the forest. The wind was much calmer here. Exhausted, Xiaohua found a large tree, then curled up in his sleeping bag and fell into a deep sleep. One day later, the harsh weather finally began to ease. To Xiaohua, what happened the day before felt like a dream, completely unreal. But everything around him reminded him that this was reality. Worse, he had fled in such a hurry yesterday that he didn't bring any food or supplies. So Xiaohua decided to return to the scene, secretly hoping that maybe some companions were still alive. But upon arrival, he found that everything was exactly the same as when he left yesterday. Everyone was lying where they fell, obviously dead for a long time. Xiaohua held back his grief, covering his companions' bodies with the tent. He gathered all the offerings from his backpack, including the mushrooms he had collected earlier, a map, and a compass, then set out alone to try to leave the mountain range. Xiaohua knew that relying on his own strength to reach Tabet Lake was almost impossible, so he decided to return along the route he came. Although it was mostly downhill, it was still a huge challenge for Xiaohua. He had little experience hiking outdoors, and now he was completely alone. The psychological pressure was immense. The food supplies quickly ran out. Xiaohua told himself he had to survive and get out. With only basic knowledge, he knew that if he followed the river, he might reach a place where people lived. Finally, fortune favored the determined. On the fourth day, he met Alexander, a tourist, which is the scene we saw at the beginning. Xiaohua was saved. He was sent to the local hospital for treatment. Everyone eagerly asked him what had happened to the climbing team. But Xiaohua was clearly deeply traumatized, and his speech was incoherent. The police could only piece together the outline of the story from his words. Moreover, after giving one media interview, Xiaohua disappeared without a trace. For a long time, no one knew where he had gone. In fact, government department had already started searching before Xiaohua was found. After finding Little Vanya, they roughly deduced where the mountaineering team encountered difficulties. However, what the rescue team discovered still cannot be explained. On the 24th of August, 1993, official helicopters had been searching the mountain range for the missing climbers for several days. That day, they finally found the place where the climbers had last met their fate. After the helicopter landed, the rescue team arrived near the camp and found the bodies. Although Valentia had covered the bodies with a tent, after more than 10 days of wind and rain, all the bodies were severely decomposed, giving off a suffocating stench. The weather had improved by then, and visibility had returned to normal. Rescuers were surprised to find them at the site of the tragedy, only a few hundred feet from the Delant scenic area, where there really was a wooden cabin. On clear days, you could see it from where the accident happened, which could have protected the climbing team, shielding them from the blizzard. So, some people wondered why Lyudmila didn't seek shelter at that time, instead camping in a completely exposed area. They found this puzzling. In addition, they only found an empty can near the campsite. Apart from that, no food packaging or scraps were found. This suggests that the team members might not have consumed enough calories to maintain their strength. Valery was a member of the search and rescue team. According to him, he had known Lyudmila for many years. In his impression, Lyudmila was known for being almost harshly strict, always demanding students pushed themselves to their limit. He wouldn't let students wear enough clothing to protect against the cold, and the daily food intake allowed was very limited. Moreover, Lyudmila often unnecessarily required students to camp in unsuitable locations, using this as a way to toughen their willpower. The rescue team brought back everyone's bodies and sent them to Fana for autopsy. After examination, it was found that almost all were lacking protein and were malnourished. This seems to further confirm that this disaster was caused by Lyudmila's poor leadership. But not everyone agrees with this conclusion. After years of silence, Valentina stepped forward to publicly support Lyudmila. She claimed that throughout the hike, there were no issues with foreign substances or food shortages. Lyudmila also took good care of everyone, fulfilling her duties as the leader. As for the cause of death of the 5 students, the official conclusion was hypothermia, while Lyudmila died from a sudden heart attack. Finally, I want to share my thoughts on this incident. Lyudmila's death from a heart attack seems reasonable to me. After all, he personally witnessed a close student, Sara, in his arms, and such a blow could trigger a heart attack. It makes sense. But I cannot agree with the conclusion that 5 students died from hypothermia. First, there was the students' strange behavior, like tearing their own clothes. It somewhat matches the reverse undressing behavior caused by hypothermia. But the bleeding from the mouth and nose, including the behavior of hitting the head against rocks, cannot be explained by hypothermia. And most importantly, the 5 students died suddenly, within a very short period of time, which is the hardest part of the case to understand. Therefore, people have offered various speculations about the truth of the incident. One theory is that everyone ate poisonous mushrooms, which caused poisoning symptoms. But the problem with this speculation is, why did Valentina also eat those mushrooms, yet she was fine? Some might say not all mushrooms were poisonous. Only a few toxic ones were mixed in, and Valentina just happened not to eat them. But if that were true, why is there no mention of it in the official death report? To me, that's also unreasonable. Because another theory is that Russia was testing nerve gas there at the time. Does everyone remember, before the expedition, someone warned the climbing team that the animals in the mountains were behaving strangely recently, which was actually due to nerve gas exposure. The climbing team was accidentally exposed to toxic gas, which triggered all sorts of bizarre behavior. This theory can explain the final death report, where the government covered up the truth for the military and casually concluded it was death by freezing, but it still can't explain why only Valentina was unharmed. Also, the location is a famous travel destination. I don't believe the military would choose this place as a biochemical weapons testing ground. Some also say it was caused by infrasound. Infrasound refers to low-frequency sound waves generated by natural movements of the earth, which are inaudible to the human ear, but can be sensed by the inner ear's vestibule, causing extreme discomfort to the body. Under certain extreme conditions, it may cause sudden illnesses or even death. But this theory also can't explain why only Valentina was unaffected, and there is no identified cause for the infrasound. Over so many years, no more infrasound has appeared here. There are many other hypotheses as well, such as the alien theory and the theory that Valentina committed murder, but it seems that after all these years, none of the theories can perfectly explain every detail. Perhaps this incident will remain an eternal mystery. Perhaps the blood, like Hamar-Daban's, will never remember those youthful footsteps, but the warning he left behind should always be etched in our hearts. Nature cannot be conquered. What we can conquer is our own arrogance and complacency,